The very commitment of Islam is to wipe Israel off the face of the map.
Chuck Missler explains how the Bible predicts Islam way before Islam was even around and Muhammad was even around.
Whoever these enemies are, the psalmist is calling God's attention to, is they've lifted up their head. What does that mean? Well, let's go on here. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. Now, the lingering mystery behind this psalm that haunts me still is who are these hidden ones? The psalmist is calling God's attention to the fact that the people of Israel are in jeopardy, and we'll get to that. But he also alludes this and consulted against thy hidden ones. Who are, at this point, God's hidden ones? Wouldn't be the angels for a lot of reasons. Who would it be? One of my conjectures, the word hidden ones, by me, it means, the Hebrew word means the hidden treasured ones. They're a prize, if you will, sort of. And who are the hidden ones? My candidate possibility, maybe this is after the rapture, and these are the raptured saints that are absent from the earth at that time. If that's true, it has huge implications for us. But let's just table that for the moment and go on and see what the psalmist says here. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. In other words, the enemies of God have aligned themselves, as it come, let us cut them off, that is Israel, from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. That's the plea of the enemies of God that's going on, that the psalmist is calling God's attention to this. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee, God. Get the picture here. The enemies of Israel have aligned themselves with one objective: to wipe Israel off the map. Not to take spoil. See, Ezekiel 38 and 39, they go to take the assembly against Israel in Ezekiel 38 is take spoil. Cattle and goods, gold and silver. They're going for spoil. Not here. They're going to wipe them out. You see the difference? Fundamental. The very commitment of Islam is to wipe Israel off the face of the map. That's exactly what the psalmist is calling God's attention to. Are you going to let that happen? Is in effect what he's saying to God. And he goes on here. See, the primary basis of the confederation of these enemies of Israel is to wipe them off the map. Okay. And we know about some people who articulate this rather vehemently in recent years, of course, Ahmadinejad. And here are the people that are involved. He lists them in the psalm. The tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites of Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek and the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. And Asher also is joined with them, and they have holpen the children of Lot. Well, the tabernacles of Edom, who are they? Now, there's a whole other study that I really commend you to get into, and that's who are the Edomites today? And you'll be in for some huge surprises. And I don't want to use up our time chasing that one. I'm just going to aver for our purposes today that Edom is, of course, among the traditional enemies of Israel, and they are singled out by the Old Testament for a special judgment and so forth. We'll talk more about them as we go, probably. The tents of Edom, I'm going to suggest, are the Palestinian refugees and the southern Jordanians. And let's just leave that without proof at the moment because it gets into some side studies that we'll use up our time on. But the tents of Edom, I'll show you pictures of the tents of Edom today. And these are traditional ones.
Wow. And
perhaps the most astonishing one is one of 96,000 people in southern Lebanon, the Palestinian refugee camps. And they're not limited to Edomites, but the Edomites are among them. And the Edomites are a special mention by Jesus in two of the letters of the seven churches. In Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9, those that say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan, are objects of Christ's comments, and we'll talk about that as a separate issue. But let's go on here. Of all these guys, the Ishmaelites, of course, are pretty straightforward. Many people don't realize that the sons of Edom were also Ishmaelites because Genesis tells us he'll be a wide man, his hand shall be against every man's hand against him. The Ishmaelites are impossible having peace even among themselves. If we look at the sons of Abraham, Under Sarah, of course, it's Isaac. Under Hagar, it was Ishmael. And under some others, it was Keturah. Now, what's interesting, of course, is Isaac has two sons, Esau and Jacob. And they started fighting each other when they were still in the womb. And Esau, of course, gets outsmarted by Jacob, loses his birthright. And so he's really teed off for that whole chicanery, and he deliberately marries into a wife of Nebajoth. And
this is all coming together. The Bible is so intricate and beautifully designed to help us know what exactly is going on in today's society. We can see that we understand what is happening. Fascinating.
Which is an Ishmaelite. In Genesis 20, he deliberately marries an Ishmaelite to upset his parents. And that means then his descendants are Ishmaelites. They are what the press typically calls Arabs. Many of them have nothing to do with Arabia particularly, but that's just the label the press uses out of their illiteracy. But the sons of Esau and the sons of Ishmael are indistinguishable because they didn't keep separate records, for what it's worth. And so there are no tribal distinctions were maintained. We have then also the Moabites. Anyway, so Moab, of course, is a descendant of Lot. And the Palestinian refugees in central Jordan would be included by that label. And so we have the Hagarenes. Sons of Hagar were Egyptians. That's a way of referring to Egypt, the sons of Hagar, if you will. And so they were Egyptians. And then we have Gebal, which is the northern Lebanese. And then we have Ammon, which is the Palestinian refugees and the northern Jordanians. The capital of Jordan is Amman, after Ammon, if you will. And so then we have Amalek, if you will. Arabs south of Israel, if you will. Agag was the king of the Amalekites, and you remember Haman of Esther was an Amalekite. And so we're familiar with those groups. And then we have the Philistines, and obviously the Hamas and the Gaza Strip is in that region. And then we have the inhabitants of Tyre, which are the Hezbollah and the southern Lebanese. And we also have Asher, which is joined with them, and that's, of course, Assyria. And then we have Syria and northern Iraq. And then we have the word holpen in the King James it really means been an arm to. That's a word out of not our normal English today, so I threw that in here to edify, if you will, the King James. And so, and then we have the children of Lot, which of course is Moab and Ammon. So these are the immediate neighbors of Israel here. And so then the psalmist says, do unto them, and then he draws a bunch of examples from the book of Judges, 4 and 5 and what have you. Do unto them as unto the Midianites, as to Syria and as to Jabin, the brook of Kishon, and which perished at Endor, and they became as dung for the earth. And so, why wouldn't God judge them in the future as he did in the past? It's sort of the implied question by the psalmist here. And so God hasn't changed. And so the psalmist is saying, do unto these guys what you did back in the book of Judges. That's in effect the...
Wow. And this is all in Psalms 83.
Saying here. And so this is impressive for a lot of reasons. The Midianites, of course, they're the tribes from the fourth son of Abram by Keturah and so on. And this is all, he's alluding to history here, so we don't have to hammer it that hard. But in the book of Judges, we can read how God judged those nations back there. In Judges 4 and 5, we have those histories, and that's what's making an allusion here. I won't take the time to go through all that here. And so, of course, Endor is a well-known spot for a variety of reasons, but we'll just move on here for this purpose. And make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb, yea, all their princes, Zebah and Zalmunna. And I don't have to track down each one of these for this purpose. The Oreb and Zeb were the prince generals of Midian. Zebah and Zalmunna were the kings. So it's their kings and their military leaders, that's summary that God dealt with here. Who said, let's make ourselves houses of God in possession. And of course, God they're defeated by Gideon, and the men of Ephraim intercepted the Midianites, and there was a big slaughter back in Judges 7 and 8. And so these are allusions the psalmist using to history. Do to our enemies today what you did back then, is what he's saying in effect. Oh God, make them like a wheel, like stubble before the wind. As the fire burneth the wood and the flame setteth the mountains on fire, so persecute them in thy tempest and make them afraid with thy storm. This is the plea of the psalmist to God. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O God. I think that's kind of interesting. There's a name for God that they're unifying under. And I suggest that might be Allah.
Oh, wow.
He goes on here. He says, let them be confounded and troubled forever. Yea, let them be put to shame and perish, that men may know that thou, whose name alone is Jehovah, as the Most High over all the earth. I think that's rather interesting. That men may know that thou, whose name alone is Jehovah, or however you want to pronounce it, art the Most High over all the earth. And most of the rabbis won't pronounce the name, they'll just pronounce the letters, Yod, He, Vav, He. Or in Yehovah, if you use the German J, and so anyway.
But yeah, that's crazy that Islam is the most counterfeit religion of Christianity, because it literally tries to take almost everything but switches things around to make, well, essentially Muhammad did it. Muhammad just switched things around so that he can pretty much do whatever he wanted.
In contrast to Allah, the moon god, that these people apparently are confederated under. Does this sound like today's news clip? It's astonishing as you look at it. The more you look at this, the more it sounds like it could happen next week. The world is getting ready for it. There's a huge tension brewing. It's about to boil over in the Middle East. And it could be viewed as fitting Psalm 83. Which, if that's correct, Psalm 83 implies a huge victory for Israel, where those enemies are wiped out. And one of my private suspicions is if Obama wipes out Iraq's nuclear capability, Netanyahu could simultaneously take his tank and wipe out the Hezbollah to the north and the Hamas to the south and just reestablish the borders of Israel and let the world scream and shout and rumble and ignore them. Up yours, world, and get on with it. That's a possibility. And if it happens, and that leads to an enormous prosperity for Israel, it could set the stage for Ezekiel 38, where the outer ring nations come in to take spoil and God.
Wow. That really seems like what's happening today, to be honest. Israel's really trying to gain ground now.
Intervenes and doesn't let them. See, apparently, according to Psalm 83, it would seem this is the only way the world is going to know that God is for him to move in judgment. That's the flavor of this psalm. Now, getting back to verse 3, who are these treasured ones that it makes allusion to? I don't know. I've gone through every conceivable conjecture, none of them fit. The one possibility, and it's just a conjecture, maybe this psalm is a post-rapture event, and the holy treasured ones are the departed saints in God's bosom. Well, that puts us in a very weird position, because if Psalm 83 is after the rapture, and Psalm 83 is about to happen this week, next month, who knows? Wow. We may not have long between us and the rapture if that conjecture is correct. Boy, that makes the agenda of this weekend zero right in on session 6. Because we want to build a chart, not what happens on the earth during the 70 weeks and all that. If there's a rapture beforehand, and God brings them with him at the second coming, what's going on in heaven? There are a couple of things we're going to focus on in session 6, and they're going to be the most important agenda that you and I are going to carry away from this weekend, interestingly enough. We have an opportunity to cram for the final. Okay, so let's move. Judgment. When you get to Ezekiel, there's 7 nations listed that Jesus is going to wipe out when he comes back. Did you know that? He's coming back as a warrior. Yep. Remember in Isaiah 61, verse 1 and 2, he reads his mandate at the synagogue in Nazareth, but he stops at a comma, closes the book and says, this day is this fulfilled. The part he doesn't read is deferred, and the day of vengeance of our God. And we'll be looking at that here shortly. But we have Ammon, Moab, Edom, Philistia, Tyre, Sidon. These 7 are clobbered by the Lord when he comes back.
That's crazy
And
to
each of
think
the
about.
judgments are detailed in Ezekiel there. They are all Muslims. Very interesting. They're all Muslims. So there's a war going on.
So it seems like those countries are against God. It's more than just what it seems, but that's wild.
Now the enemies, at the present time, they're surrounded, Israel is surrounded by their immediate neighbors that are committed to wiping them off the map. And it's misleading to represent them as Arabs. No, they're Muslims. The Persians resent being called Arabs, but they're Muslims. It would appear that a prerequisite victory for Israel will set the stage for subsequent ill-fated event of Ezekiel 38 and 39, seeking spoils, gold and silver, cattle and goods, and so forth. The order of events is Israel's regathered in land, ancient cities are rebuilt and inhabited, they meet the Muslim resistance, they establish an army for defense, adjacent Muslim nations confederate, as we saw here, and the confederacy is committed to the destruction of Israel, as we've seen here. War starts between the confederacy and Israel. Title is regained. My people Israel is reestablished after Hosea chapter 1 and all that. Israel decisively defeats the confederacy, and the scripture is full of those references. Israel has become an exceedingly great army after Ezekiel 37. Israel takes prisoners of war, fascinating enough, in Jeremiah and Zephaniah. And the region is reshaped. And that's where Isaiah 17:1 may be part of the picture. Who knows? Israel will expand its borders, as that's alluded to by Obadiah, Jeremiah, and Isaiah. And then, of course, Israel dwells securely in the land, which is a precondition for Ezekiel 38. And a segment of God's plan is to be fulfilled. And then, maybe, the ill-fated Magog invasion attempt will be ready. And so that's...
That makes you think about all the stuff that is happening today. Is Israel trying to gain ground, trying to gain more prosperity? Seems like as they do that, that will set up the time for an ancient war that was predicted. I'd love to know what you guys think, but that's crazy that Chuck Missler sees this and something's fishy is going on.
That's a projection. But in any case, that having all been said, now let's focus on what our real topic is, and that's the 70th week. We've had the precedent conditions prior to the 70th week in front of us, and so we're going to have, it's defined by a covenant being enforced by a coming world leader. And the last half, it splits the week, this event, it splits the week into two halves, and the Lord himself labels the second half the Great Tribulation.
That's so fascinating. I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments below. Chuck Missler is doing amazing work even after he passed away. It's truly amazing how his videos are impacting so many people's lives. So I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments below, whatever that might be. And thank you guys so much for watching. I really love and appreciate you all so much. Thank you guys. Have an amazing day and God bless.